The heat in the southeast U.S. continues, and this has made the dry conditions over much of the southeast just that much more pronounced. How dry has it been? Jeff will address that, while Aaron and I will look ahead at what we can expect in the coming weeks and months in the September edition of the Water Resources Outlook. Here's Jeff to get us started.
So you're right, Todd. The heat does continue, and so does the dryness. Thanks, Todd. So here's the past 30 days precipitation, and you see a lot of green shading there across the region, meaning less than 2 inches of rainfall over the past 30 days. But you also see the red areas there along the east coast indicating more than 5 inches of rainfall. Most of the rain on the map was associated with the tropical systems we've had the past month, though minimal rainfall has helped with keeping flooding at bay across the southeast. Now we're beginning to worry about rainfall deficits. Here's the departures from the last 30 days, and as you can see, deficits are evident across most of the southeast, but especially western sections of the Florida Peninsula. The only above normal area is along the coast there, where we had Hurricane Dorian bring some rainfall. So how are departures looking so far for the year? Here we see a continued worsening as far as the rainfall deficits across parts of South and Central Alabama into most of Georgia and into South Carolina. The wet spring and early summer still keeping positive rainfall amounts across the southern Appalachians and Florida Peninsula. So many areas needing rainfall, and it does not help with that we are going into a dry time of year for most of the southeast. We see October here for most states is the driest month of the year, or nearly the driest. So of course this is affecting stream flows, and we see many river gauges now reporting below normal stream flows, shown by the orange dots there, especially across Georgia. Other areas just remaining in normal conditions. But over the next couple of weeks, with more dry weather, we're going to see more orange dots begin to show up across the southeast. And also, with the reduced stream flows, we are beginning to see reservoir pools come down below their targets for this time of year. Some reservoirs will begin going to their lower winter pools, and so some of these will be meeting these levels earlier than they want. But let's start here in North Carolina, and we see most reservoirs near their target. Lake Norman there running a little below target for this time of year, and Falls almost a foot below target. So some of the dry weather beginning to affect reservoirs. We go into South Carolina, and we see again most just slightly under their targets, but the Savannah project there now seeing their reservoirs running below target, with Hartwell at about 2.5 feet below, and now Thurman is 4 feet below target for this time of year. Going into Georgia now, we see all the reservoirs below their target, with Lake Lanier below target by 2.4 feet, with Allatoona at 5 feet below target. Now, Allatoona has a winter target that they try to reach in November and December, and it's like 828 to 825. So the drawdown is not out of the ordinary, but it's early due to the dry weather, and this is the case for many of the reservoirs this time of year. So moving into northern Alabama, we see these reservoirs not faring as badly, most of them near their target pools. And as we move into South Alabama here, again, we see reservoirs close to their target, with the exception of Thurlow there, which they are still working on the spillway gates there and are expected to return to normal by late this year. So we talked about the dry weather and lower stream flows, so of course we have to talk about drought. Here's the latest drought monitor for September 17th, and we see a growing coverage of dryness and drought across the southeast, and now small pockets of even D2 there in Georgia and South Carolina, which D2 is severe drought conditions. These D2 areas are actually very close to our local area here in Georgia, and we can vouch for the fact that many of the lakes are low, and actually some of the small ponds are actually empty in our area. So drought expanding during a time of the year that generally does not provide much rain, so a bit of concern for expanding drought across the region. And this is the trend as well. We see lots more yellow there since last August as we compare the maps. Now, instead of about a third of the southeast there with dryness or drought, we're close to about half. So where will we go from here in the short term and long term? Aaron and Todd will give some insight.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Now, looking ahead into the meteorology, there's really not much expected in the way of rainfall over the next few days, or even the next week, across most of the southeast. South Florida will be the only exception, with some rain and thunderstorm potential this weekend. So the drought conditions that Jeff talked about earlier will see little relief and likely worsen. Now let's take a look at the next few days of weather. Looking at Friday first, note the area of high pressure along the Atlantic coast, spreading across the southeast of Mississippi. This will be the dominant feature for the next several days, bringing the rain-free conditions for most. There is also a cold front draped across southern Florida, bringing the chances for rain and thunderstorms. That will continue into Saturday as the front stalls out over South Florida and high pressure remains over the southeast and the Atlantic coast. It will be more of the same Sunday and into early next week. There's also a weak cold front sagging south early next week, and by Tuesday it will be draped across the southeast, stalling out and remaining over the area Wednesday and into Thursday. There's still a lot of uncertainty with how much, if any, rain we might see along with this front, but it looks like it won't be much. We can really see this in the 7-day precipitation forecast with a noticeable dry area from eastern Mississippi over to Virginia. Even looking at the longer term 8 to 14-day outlook, below average rainfall is expected to continue. Though the Atlantic Basin is active with Humberto heading out to sea, soon to be Hurricane Jerry heading northwest over the Leeward Islands in Puerto Rico, and 2 other disturbances being monitored, none of these are expected to impact or bring any rainfall to the southeast over the next week.
Now that Aaron has looked at the next 2 weeks, let's pull out our crystal ball and see if we can look out a little bit further. First, we will address where we've been and where we are going with respect to the tropical season. We have passed the climatological peak, which occurs on September 10th, and are trying to race out of the hurricane season with no tropical systems hitting our area. There's good and bad to that. As Jeff showed us earlier, many parts of the southeast U.S. have dried out significantly in the last month due to heat and the lack of rain. One thing that we can say for our tropical season usually is when tropical storms stay away from the southeast, we remain very dry. This isn't always the case, but in many cases it is. Here's hoping for some normal winter rainfall to catch us up once hurricane season has ended. Here's our 2019 hurricane season so far. A few close calls for the southeast, but overall we have dodged the worst of the storms so far. We are not out of the woods yet, though. The last 2 years have provided significant storms in October. I hope that doesn't become a tradition in the southeast. However, things still remain active in the Atlantic Basin, with 3 named storms out there and a few potential storms in the offing. Humberto is moving past Bermuda and away from the area. Imelda is wreaking havoc over southeast Texas, and Jerry is currently forecast to stay away from Puerto Rico and rain away from the U.S. coast. Chances for development from those other disturbances are not looking especially favorable in the long haul, so at this time, persistence of dry weather looks likely, as Aaron has already talked about. What we do have to watch carefully is what's happening with Imelda over southeast Texas. Those are the types of storms that are different from, say, Dorian, which typically gets a lot of press, and we can see it coming very quickly. Weak, slow-moving storms can be just as deadly, so we'll be watching the Gulf carefully to make sure we are ready if something like that develops. As we get into the last third of September, our storms still tend to form in the Atlantic and Caribbean, but can also form in the Gulf of Mexico. As we get into October, the Gulf of Mexico and the eastern seaboard have a greater likelihood of development. It looks as though we will have neutral ENSO conditions through the fall and the winter. Temperatures may remain above normal, but just below the threshold for an El Niño. That means that the Climate Prediction Center may have a hard time with showing above normal or below normal precipitation this winter. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's take a look at next month. And October looks to continue the trend of above normal temperatures, not just across the southeast, but across the whole country. And they're all expected to be above normal. Again, these especially hot temperatures have contributed to the increased drought across the southeast, and continued warmth will degrade conditions in many areas. Our precipitation forecast leans toward a continued active tropical season, and with how close storms have been getting to the U.S., if the pattern shifts a little, it could possibly open the door for storms to move inland. However, right now, that's not what we're expecting. So we will watch the tropics closely and see how this hurricane season unfolds. The seasonal forecast from October through December shows a similar pattern with potential active weather from Florida up through the mid-Atlantic states. Again, we'll be watching the tropics as this may be the key to this forecast verifying. As mentioned before, since we have neutral ENSO conditions, the southeast U.S. is less likely to have an above or a below normal signal associated with it, and we will have equal chances of above, below, or near normal precipitation. As we near winter, we will look for large-scale patterns that may affect our weather. So the bottom line, in the short term, we've passed the peak of hurricane season, and that's good news, although we are not out of the woods yet, as we still have till November 30th for the end of hurricane season. But it is good news that we've gotten a good way through the season, and we've had some impacts along the coast, but not too much of it has come inland, which is good news. But we look to stay continued warm and mostly dry over the southeast, and there are some areas obviously that need some rain during this time, so we'll be hoping for some rain, not necessarily associated with the tropical season. As for the long term, neutral ENSO, which doesn't give us a one way or the other a signal, and so as we go through the rest of the fall, maybe with some continued active tropical season, we might see some stuff along the eastern seaboard, but it's kind of hard to say right now, and once we get into winter, we really don't have a signal either way. So we'll look as we get later into the fall at what our winter's going to be, to maybe some longer term patterns, and see if we can find something that'll give us an idea of what to expect for this winter. Our next Water Resources Outlook we'll plan to record on October 17th of next month. If you have any questions between now and then, feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next month.